Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast. We are here to continue, and actually to finish up this week, Mac, our ACC Under Review series with the two teams from the Commonwealth of Virginia. We will have Virginia Tech today and Virginia tomorrow. This interview, these two, Mac, are interesting, and even like BC last week, because it's hard because the season did not go well. And so you're trying to examine it under a microscope, but you also want to have some optimism for the future and not just sit there and belabor the point. Yeah, this team had a terrible year.
Right.
So I think Bill Roth, the play-by-play voice of the Hokies, balances this perfectly. He was so good. And I know you and Bill go way back, Mac.
We go way, way back, all the way back to this past football season.
Yeah.
And, we had the privilege of calling one of the craziest games anyone's ever seen. And that was that, Wake Forest at Louisville game.
That'll bond two people together.
Forever. I mean, when you see 20 turnovers in one half, it's just, or one quarter, the third quarter. It's something that you'll never forget. And Bill is great, so fun to work with. And, he's a really funny guy. He's a great combination of like storytelling and stats and just analysis of what he sees. And he's been doing it a long time. I mean, this was his 28th football season with the Hokies. He did 27 straight and then took a little stint. I think he wanted to just get out of the mountains. He wanted to go down to the beach. He wanted to be down in Florida. And now he's back. He will be again back for the 23 season. So going on 29 years, I have to think he wants to get to that 30 mark. Just what is really cool and impressive. But Bill made this episode so much fun, a little comic relief, but great analysis. And like he said, he just spoke. You'll hear this in the episode. Just spoke with Coach, sat down with Coach Pry, and kind of got his vision for 23 and kind of recapped the season as well. So look out for that episode on his social media channels. But really enjoy Bill, our Rock'em Sox guest, and let's just get to it because this was a fun interview. Bill Roth, my man, I've been waiting on this episode, brother. I texted you like 2 months in advance. I said, hey, we're going to call you. We need you when we get to this Virginia Tech episode. It's finally here, brother. Welcome into the show. Thanks for joining us.
I am so excited to be on with both of you. It's great. What an honor. You guys keep things light and fun and funny. So
that's right.
Let's talk some Hokies and ACC football.
Come on. We're going to do it. We're going to do it, brother. So first year, Coach Pry, I think that it was an interesting process when we look at the hiring thing because, we had heard things out of that camp where we're going after a head coach. We're going to get somebody, this and that. And then Coach Pry's hired. And we've said this many times. I didn't know who he was. And I'm like, who the heck is this? But then I start looking into him. I hear his speeches. I hear his mindset. I'm like, this is a grand slam hire. This is unbelievable what Virginia Tech has done here. A rocky start, to say the least. You lose at ODU, get a couple of wins, have just a bad run there, but finish on a super high note. So how would you assess year one of Coach Pry's era?
Well, it was a transition year for sure because he came in. I think he likely thought that he may have had more talent on that team than he did. I think that was number one. And then schematically, I think they wanted to be a running football team and try to work the clock, run the ball. And with a injured Malachi Thomas for most of the season, they didn't really have the back that could do that. And now they're trying to change their offensive scheme, so to speak, in midstream. And they didn't have the personnel to do that either. There were also some other things that will be different for this year. This year, in year one, Coach Pry called the defenses. He'll be turning that completely over to Chris Marv as the defensive coordinator.
Let's go.
And we visited last week, actually, coming up the next week or so, we're actually going to have a show that Coach Pry and my longtime analyst Mike Burnup and I recorded with Brent a couple days ago, and he talked about that. He said coaching the defense took his attention away from time management, how to use timeouts, visiting with special teams huddles before a play, making in-game decisions because he was calling the defense. So that's what I mean when I say it was somewhat of a transition year. They didn't really have the pieces, the parts of the puzzle that they wanted, and Coach Pry wasn't 100% sure on how he wanted to run the defense, so to speak. But in 23, Chris Marv will call all the defense, and Pry will be 100% head coach on the sidelines.
That is interesting and good to know, because I remember when we talked with Coach Pry preseason, he said, oh, yeah, I'm calling the defense. And I think it can be tough for a guy that's been a coordinator for so long and the defense is his baby and he just doesn't want to let it go. But there's so much that goes into being a head coach and kind of being that CEO on the sidelines. Overall, with this team and with the locker room, Bill, I mean, we know it was a rough year, but there were a lot of losses that were close, tough losses. And then to finish with the win over Liberty, I thought was impressive for sure. So how do you feel like the locker room and the players handled this season overall?
I thought that was probably one of the highlights. If there was two highlights, it was the recruiting and the reconnection with coaches throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and B, exactly what you mentioned, Kelly, the locker room. The attitude on the team, and not just in the locker room, right? In the weight room. Sometimes when you have a bad season, you can see issues occur in a weight room or in the classroom. They had none of that. And so when you look at the overall health of a program, the one-loss record is the number one thing we all look at, of course, whether you're a fan or an administrator or a broadcaster or whomever, right? The record's the most important thing. But when you do a deeper dive into the other things, the academics and transfer percentage, and see kids improving in the weight room, all of those metrics are really up. And I think that is why, for those of us that see that, you have such high hopes for what this team and this program can be.
I love that. Two really good points there, Bill. And before we jump into some individual play, I do want to touch on what you just said there in recruiting and the importance of getting back into the Commonwealth and the 757 and Richmond and everywhere in between. Why is that such a great importance to this coaching staff and for Virginia Tech?
Well, every Virginia Tech football team of note over the last 40 years has had a lot of in-state players, and just about every Tech All-ACC player or NFL player is a native Virginian. There's exceptions to the rule, some Florida kids, but every great Tech quarterback, whether it was Michael Vick or Marcus Vick or Brian Randall or Logan Thomas, you can go through the list. Tyrod Taylor, they're all Virginia guys. And, 3 years ago, Virginia Tech guys signed one in-state player. That's almost mathematically impossible, right, to sign just one.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, this year, 13 of them. And by the way, let me give you another angle here. So Fontel Mines, who played at UVA, former really good player at Virginia, is on Virginia Tech staff. He signed just about every one of those in-state players this year. And so they gave him a big raise. So the Hokie Nation is proud of our on-staff Wahoo, Coach Mines. But it's very important, clearly, whether it's Northern Virginia or the Hampton Roads area, the Tidewater area, which you call the 757. And it's challenging. Everybody in the ACC, Shane Beamer's in there, working it hard in that area from South Carolina. So it's a very fertile area, and it's one that both Tech and UVA really have to do a good job to develop those relationships to keep those in-state kids around.
Yeah, and I think that was – man, we just said, before we even knew who the coach was, we said, hey, number one goal – put a fence up around Virginia. You have to keep those players because, people like North Carolina, Clemson, all these different teams they're coming in and taking the best talent. And how can we make it cool again to stay in state? How can we make it a thing where I want to represent that VT on my helmet and play for those great fans? And I think that's what they're doing. And I think that's a vital piece. Let's jump into some individual play here, Bill, because, looking at the quarterback position, it's the most important in any sport. We all know that. And Grant Wells, I mean, he showed some flashes where I was like, man, if we can just get more of that, we'll be in a really good spot. But there's other times where I'm just scratching my head wondering what he would be looking at. So in your opinion, did he do enough to be the guy going into this spring, going into this next year, or are we going to see, some interesting battles there?
I don't think Kyron Drones transfer from Baylor to come to Virginia Tech if he didn't have a shot to win the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think everyone knows that. And that is the new reality of college football, particularly at the quarterback position, right? And I think Drones is going to have a great chance. I think right now, if he's not the most athletic player in Tech's football program, he's second, or it's 1A and 1B. He's a very unique player, and I'm excited to see him play. The difference is that Wells has a lot of experience, all those years at Marshall and a year at Tech under his belt. I think it's going to be a very interesting spring, but it will be a battle. And Pry mentioned to me last week, he says, we're going to open it up everywhere. They signed 2 transfer receivers. They got a couple of transfer running backs. They have a whole bunch of kids who enrolled early. And while it might be hard for some of those new offensive line guys to play, it's probably unrealistic for a freshman offensive lineman to come in and play right away. Everything else is wide open, including quarterback.
Yeah, and it should be probably after this kind of season, and you're able to have a full offseason with your guys, and you can use the portal. And I like that Pry is doing that, but also saying we've got some guys on this roster we're recruiting in state. We want to not go full on portal, like sell out to the portal, if you will. But another guy that Virginia Tech has brought in is Jennings, the wide receiver. I think he's one that you were alluding to there, Bill. Have you heard anything about him, seen him at all?
Well, he had a really good game against the Hokies last year.
Bill saw him a lot.
There you go.
Yeah, in fact, Jennings won the Old Dominion game for the Monarchs against the Hokies. One of the players, right? He had a really good game. Nice, and that's an example of Fontel Mines and a relationship that he had. Look, I understand it. I mean, we have seen this before, right? Virginia Tech won a men's basketball ACC championship with 2 former Wofford players, right? Yeah. We have seen it. We saw Florida State. Florida State has all those transfers, and they're doing so well. And now what happens is you've got guys on your team playing against their former team, and that could happen. Hokies play Marshall this year. Grant Wells playing against Marshall. That's our version of Sam Hartman going against Wade, right? I mean, it's just it tastes different, right? For longtime football fans to have your guy playing against you or your new player playing against his old team. But I think Jennings really is a huge addition for Tech for a couple of reasons. Caleb Smith was probably Virginia Tech's only real deep threat last year as a receiver, and he transferred to Notre Dame with Hartman.
Right.
So it's right.
Package deal.
Can't keep up. I mean, geez.
I know. So they needed some help, and whether you call it collegiate version of a free agent signing, Jennings is a huge guy. There's no question.
I'm excited to see it. Just again, I think that was a piece that was really missing outside, of what we saw from Caleb and the things that he was able to do. So now that you have that, can it expound? Can it get better? Bill, we talk about all these open positions and battles and going back on different struggles. What, in your opinion, you saw these guys every week. You're there in practice sometimes. You see all this. What could you pinpoint specifically that maybe caused more of the offensive struggles than most?
I don't think they had the back that they wanted that could run the ball. They and whether it's the back or the offensive line, whatever, they want to run the ball, and they couldn't. They were never a consistent running team. And if you're going to play the system that they do, and your quarterback doesn't give you a whole lot in the run game, I thought, and Coach Pry mentioned this a little bit, they became very easy to defend.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't go over the top. They didn't have a big play. They couldn't push you around up front. And so you know what happens then? You punt a lot. And so I think that was the number one. The thing is their inability to run the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's this is a world, man. It will never change in college football. The line of scrimmage is so important, and if you can stop the run, you're going to be really good. If you can run the ball, you're going to be really good. And I think that's just something that when we see teams struggle, it's easy to look right there at those lines of scrimmage and say, okay, we can figure this out better. Can we keep going? How about the defensive side of the ball? Because this unit, again, just flashy. Just you can see that it's there. You can see that things are happening, but it just wasn't consistent enough. Pretty much middle of the pack when you talk about yardage and points, but dead last in turnovers created and second to last in sacks. And, those are two areas that Virginia Tech normally thrives in. How do you expect, I guess, them to move forward in those two areas specifically in 23?
That was a big impact, a big focus in recruiting and in the portal as well. They did not get interceptions last year. They were not the ball hawking defense that they wanted to be. Coach Pry wanted that defense to look a lot like Penn State's defense, which really runs to the ball and attacks and swarms, and it never got to that point. This is stuff that gets fixed through recruiting. Again, like you said, they weren't bad defensively, but they never could come up with that game-breaking pick. and they didn't get fumbles, and they were dead last in that category. And it's hard to win. The analytics of it, the field position, they were always starting at the minus 23.
Right.
And, it can help your offense and your points per game if you're starting on the plus 30 or better, or getting a couple of pick sixes. They didn't have one. And so I think that they're going to work really hard in that regard moving forward. Clearly, running the ball on offense and creating turnovers on defense are A and B, or 1A and 1B for this season.
Yeah, points of emphasis heading into this season for sure. And, we wanted to – it's tough when we do these under-review episodes for teams that struggled, because there's, the under-review part is not exactly pleasant because we're breaking it down and seeing what went wrong. We just released Boston College last week, and it was similar. But what separates Virginia Tech, and Mac and I said this many, many times as we were breaking down games throughout the fall, these fans show up, and they deserve a winning football team. They are there, rain or shine. They are there when, Virginia Tech's completely down in the dumps. They show up. And that's always impressed me about Virginia Tech. So why do you think that is, Bill? I mean, you've been around this program for a long time. You understand Hokie Nation. It seems if you're going to keep showing up through that season, you're going to show up regardless. And I'm impressed by that.
Me too. Coach Pry mentioned that several times, that he used it as recruiting. He had kids on campus, and he said, we got 2 wins. It's 41 degrees. It's pouring down rain. It's foggy. You can't even see the top of the stadium. Georgia Tech is here. They stink. And there's 64,000 people there.
Right.
Imagine what it's like when we start winning. Mm-hmm. So that was Pry's pitch.
Yeah.
I think it's cultural and it's institutional, which is really academic words. People in Virginia like going to Virginia Tech football games. Yeah. It's a state. It's the 9th biggest state in the country, population-wise, and there's not a single pro team. There's a lot of people in Virginia, and they love the Hokies, even if they didn't go to school at Virginia Tech. They're like the pro team. And Eric knows this stat. It's a good stat and a bad stat. There were only 2 college teams that lost 8 games and averaged over 60,000 fans a game last year. Nebraska and Virginia Tech.
Wow.
And that's not a list you necessarily want to be on. It's kind of a bittersweet list, but in this instance, I think it goes to show that you're right. The Hokie Nation, the fan base, has really never left and is totally bought in on Pry. Mm-hmm. And they're going to come, win or lose, rain, shine, fog, whatever the weather is. They pack that place each and every week.
Bill, that stat is ridiculous. I had not heard that stat. Wow. The people of Nebraska and Virginia Tech, Southern Virginia, know what's up. Bill, I'm just curious your thoughts on this, because I'm looking at Virginia Tech's schedule. We actually have the schedule for this episode. Some of the previous episodes, we didn't have the schedule yet. How do you feel, and how do you think Virginia Tech fans feel? Because give me the vibe on this. Playing Old Dominion in Marshall. When I see that, I think, why? Why on earth are you doing that? And I get it that from a money perspective, to do a home and home, it helps, et cetera. But how do you feel when Virginia Tech has Old Dominion and at Marshall on the schedule, especially considering what Old Dominion did to the Hokies last year?
You want the politically correct answer?
No.
I mean, I've got a lot of friends at Old Dominion and at Marshall. So.
Oh, good. So you get to have a reunion, Bill. That's great.
Jim Phillips doesn't want ACC teams playing home and home with non-Power Fives. And so that came out. There was the Raleigh newspaper did a big story about it. And that impacts like a school like South Florida, right? Because they've always ACC teams are going to Tampa, and there's a reason to perhaps play like in Tampa if you recruit down there.
Sure,
and I think for Virginia Tech to play in the 757, you could make the argument that it's close to those kids. It's close to Hampton and Newport News and Norfolk and Virginia Beach, and it's right in the heart of it. And if Virginia Tech is having the kind of program it has, it shouldn't matter where the game is with Old Dominion or Marshall.
Sure.
But from a television standpoint, our obviously our league's deal is with ESPN. And when Virginia Tech plays a road game at Marshall, that's not part of the ESPN television package. That hurts our league's inventory. That hurts the league's bottom line. And moving forward, when you talk about strength of schedule, it hurts there as well. So as we get into the college football playoff era, it makes no sense. So that's the short end.
There you go, Bill.
It makes no sense to play, and that's what Jim Phillips says. At the same time, you want to be fair to the athletes. Look, in my mind, I'd love to play a 10-game ACC schedule.
Yeah, come on. Now we're talking.
The COVID era. Remember when the SEC, every game was a conference game for 1 year? I mean, but as Jim points out, every school has different scheduling responsibilities, right?
Sure.
Some of the teams in our league have to play an SEC game in Week 12.
Correct.
Others don't have the finances to do it. They have to play a road game. Other teams can pack their stadium regardless of who they play. I think that it's a financial decision, and it's a really tough balancing act for athletic directors. It is cheaper for Virginia Tech to play Old Dominion and Marshall home and home than like during the Beamer era, you could buy home games with Kent State, Miami, Ohio, right? But those game costs now. We saw Oklahoma and Georgia paying MAC teams $1.5 million, $1.6 million for a game.
Yeah,
and I don't know that it's Virginia Tech athletic director's responsibility to fund Mid-American Conference programs. So there's that balance. In my mind, I'd love to be playing Tennessee and South Carolina and Georgia and Texas A&M. It's so funny. One year on Coach Beamer's radio show, I said, man, I wish Tech could play Florida State every year. Like, even when they're not on the schedule them as a non-conference team. And Coach Beamer, he cocked his head to one side and he goes, are you crazy?
Yeah. Why would I do that?
Have you ever tried to cover a kick against those guys?
And of course, that's what he says. Cover a kick. He doesn't say anything. It's Beamer ball, baby. He's going to.
Of course, he's thinking special teams.
That's brilliant.
So it's like I get it. But look, we're going to go to Marshall, and they've got great people over there, and
they do.
And try to. That's Marshall won 9 games last year.
I know.
They beat Notre Dame. They got good players and really good coaches. Yeah. So, and there's a history between those two schools. But I'm gonna side with the commissioner, Jim Phillips. I think ACC teams should only play other Power 5 teams, and I'd like to see an additional conference game in the ACC as well. But again, that they don't let us broadcasters make legislation in that
I don't
regard.
know why. That
was a great, nuanced, somewhat politically correct, but also somewhat real answer, Bill. That was great.
That's right. He got into it. He knows what he's doing. Bill, we talk about this schedule a little bit, the changes. Kind of just wanted your opinion on, Virginia Tech's permanent 3, and then this new world that we're going to be in with no divisions. Is that good for Virginia Tech? What are your thoughts on this new model that we're going to be playing with starting this season?
I love it for the players, and I think overall for the health of the league, it is good. From a selfish standpoint, Tech has played Miami every year since 1991, and so that goes away. It's going to be really hard on coaches because some teams are going to be out of this race in September, whereas in the past with the divisions, you could make a run.
Oh, very true. Okay, no one's pointed that out. That's very true.
And so, someone's going to finish 14th and 13th, and that's
Bill,
hard
I would
to spell.
add, except for the 2 or 3 bottom teams of the Atlantic every year. They've been out since September. So those coaches have dealt with it.
But I mean, you know how it is. Like the Pittsburgh Pirates are eliminated from the division by Memorial Day every year, and that's going to happen in our league. And I'll give you one other thing that I need to get some clarity on. So we don't have divisions. So let's say Florida State and Clemson finish 1-2, like they're going to be picked. Okay. What if Louisville has a great year?
Yeah.
Okay. Coach Braum comes in. Louisville doesn't play either one of those teams.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
So the tiebreaker is head-to-head. Well, they don't play. Well, who's going to the championship game? And
flip that coin, Bill. Flip the coin.
That's a good point. Is it ranking in the playoff poll?
The ACC hasn't announced that yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's how you did against the 4th-place team. That's the thing. At least in the past, coming down the stretch in November, you knew what route you had to make the championship game.
Right.
If you're Jeff Brom and you're Louisville, for example, just this year, and that's going to change because again, I like the new model.
Right.
But you could see a situation where Louisville fans are like, wait a minute, We're not playing Clemson. We're not playing Florida State. We've got a really good team. What about us? We don't have a chance to prove it on the field. Those are the there's some things that'll come out.
But the argument there is you go undefeated, and Clemson and Florida State do have to play each other, so someone's going to have a loss. I mean, you have a – I would still, if I'm Louisville, say I don't have Clemson and Florida State, great. I would still approach it that way.
I'd say you don't deserve to be in. Bill, what would you do? So if we got to that, what would you want it to be? What would you want the tiebreaker to be?
We always go with the best steakhouse in town, Eric, so that would be a playoff.
Man, come on.
Who has the biggest T-bone?
Clemson's not
That's
winning
Jeff
anything.
Ruby's. Jeff Ruby's is winning that.
For sure.
That is brilliant. All right, before we get out of here, Bill, this has been so much fun. Just give us some expectations, man, because, again, you're in the program. You just talked with Coach. That episode's coming out soon. His thoughts, your thoughts on, what should Hokie Nation be looking forward to in 23?
Okay, so when Drone signed with Baylor, that was a really big recruit for them. He was a very highly recruited player. He won championships at the highest level in Texas. The Kyron Drones, Grant Wells quarterback focus is going to be really important at Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. Secondly, there's a big running back room. I think that is wide open as well. And I think the competition will make those guys better going into spring ball. And then the third thing, and Coach Pry and I talked about that, there's going to be a second wave of portal movement after spring ball nationals.
That's right.
And so we had the big boost earlier. It's going to happen again, right? There's going to be players that at the end of spring ball at their respective institution go, oh, man, I'm not playing. Mm-hmm. Where is there some playing time? So I don't know if there may be different players on that Virginia Tech roster in August and everybody's roster than there are going into spring ball. And the beauty of the portal is that you can get kids. The negative is you can lose them. And so those are the three things. But for me personally, I want to see the quarterback battle at Virginia Tech because Tech did not have consistent quarterback play last year. Very good play at times, but inconsistent quarterback play leads to losses. And they're going to have to be better at that position to get to where they want to be this fall.
Yeah, and I think one even interesting point about that is even if one doesn't separate, the fact that there is someone there will help push you even further. I think that we have seen many times, where there's only one guy and he can perform however he wants to perform. You ain't putting anybody else in because there is nobody else. And hopefully that's what we see, change at a minimum. That's what we see. Now, you would love to see competition breed greatness, and we've got this guy who's just going to be a dude for us. And I hope that that's what we see. But I think at a minimum, that competition, everything you just said there, is going to get them going. We're excited, man. Hokie Nation, I know they are as well. Need to get them back to the promised land, and certainly think Coach Pry's the guy for it. This was a lot of fun, Bill. Appreciate your time for joining us today.
I love this show. I watch it all the time, and thanks for having me on. Appreciate you both and the passion you bring to our conference. Go get them, guys.
Thanks again to our guy, Bill, for joining us here on this episode. We got a little philosophical at the end, talking about should Virginia Tech be playing Old Dominion? And I think that's a fun conversation. And Jim Phillips, as Bill indicated, has made his points and his thoughts on that very clear that he doesn't want that to happen. But Virginia Tech is locked in to play Old Dominion from now till the end of time. So I don't know. Something's got to give there. I'm not sure. Bill's stat really blew my mind that there are two fan bases out there that averaged more than 60,000 fans per game and lost 8 games this year. Nebraska and Virginia Tech. That was an amazing stat. Yes. I was blown away by that. Those probably would have been my 2 guesses, but still to hear that stat. And Mac, you and I talked about it all season. We would just say, prayers up for the Hokies fans because they still showed up, and they deserve almost more than any fan base in this league, honestly. They deserve a good team. They deserve a team that is worth cheering for and worth showing up in this terrible weather to watch. And I really hope they get it. And I do think for this year, it's interesting. We ask expectations at the end. And Bill didn't give us much just because you don't know much. I mean, I get that.
Did you catch on to that?
You don't know much. But when you look at the schedule, you don't have Clemson, you don't have North Carolina, and you don't have Miami. I know they're sad about not having Miami.
Oh.
So it is somewhat manageable. But in the end, when you look at Virginia Tech, you think you got to beat Old Dominion and you got to beat Marshall. Like, these are the games you have to win at Marshall, by the way, as Bill was saying, not exactly a cupcake.
Yeah.
So their schedule, you avoid some of the heavy hitters, but it's still a lot of the teams they're playing in the ACC are some of those middle of the pack, Syracuse, Louisville, which are not guaranteed wins for the Hokies.
No. I mean, it's going to be one of those, seasons where, okay, we have to start winning the games we're supposed to
Exactly.
win. And that is Marshall, that is ODU. And that Marshall game ain't going to be easy. I mean, you're going to their house. This was a top, I think, 8 defense in the country. A lot of those players are coming back for Marshall. It's going to be the same team. And guess what? They get after the quarterback. Virginia Tech wasn't too great at protecting. Grant Wells, especially at the end of the season, had 2 games where it was 6 or more sacks that he got hit. And they were fantastic at forcing turnovers, which, as we know, Grant has had a little bit of an issue there protecting the football. So that game, honestly, that's going to tell me so much about who Virginia Tech is and who they're going to be for this season. So I'm super intrigued just to see that. And, just hearing from Bill and, hearing about the quarterback competition and how, that's hopefully going to make everybody better. It's going to produce a really good, talented guy that is going to lead this Hokie team. And I think when you look at the running back position, Malachi has to be the guy, has to stay healthy. He was such like a revelation his first year. Like he came in and it was just, oh my goodness, who is this kid? He's a big back. He's young. And then, last year just plagued with injury in a year that I think everybody thought he was going to be the bell cow. He was going to be the guy. And so, when I look at that, I look at both lines of scrimmage. I just remember KG going to their practice when we went, I think it was week 2 last year. I'm looking around like, where are the dudes? Where are the long, athletic, freaky looking, athletes that I've come to expect from Virginia Tech? They're just not there. And so, these guys have to go and recruit, have to go in the portal and figure it out and get them. But the one thing that stays true, and you just mentioned it, these fans are amazing. I mean, every time that we go to Virginia Tech, it's so much fun. The passion is there. The electricity is like no other. And it's just, I cannot imagine, like a 10-0 ranked team welcoming in a big opponent. I mean, that place will be.
It used to happen. We've seen it. I mean, with Shane Beamer, not Shane, Frank.
That's
Shane.
right. That's right. I agree. And
not trying to allude to anything.
That's right. And like you said, they deserve it. The fan base never has left their side. And I think we've seen that from other fan bases. We've seen, a Florida State team fall from grace and the stadium's empty. I mean, we got people reading books at football games. You don't ever see that at Virginia Tech.
At least that guy was there.
Yeah, shout out to – well, was he there? He was sitting in the stadium.
He said, I'm going to support my team, but I can't watch, so I'm going to bring a book.
But I can't watch. But anyway, great episode from Bill. Super grateful for his time. And we're wrapping it up, KG. One more of these episodes. It's been such a fun mini-series. Really appreciate you guys tagging along here. But we'll be back later this week with UVA and close the door on this ACC under review. But appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Another great episode of Gramlich and Mac Lane. Do us a favor. Go over to YouTube. Mash the subscribe button right here if you're watching us. Really appreciate all y'all's support. This has been a really fun ride. And also the OGs, go over to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, subscribe. We would greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.